Our journey begins a very, very long time ago, long before any living thing called this planet home. Imagine a world still being born, a truly spectacular and violent sight. The Earth was a ball of molten rock, glowing red and orange in the blackness of space. Volcanoes erupted everywhere, covering the surface with rivers of fiery lava. Giant rocks called asteroids constantly fell from the sky, crashing into the young planet and creating massive craters. This was not a quiet or peaceful place. It was a world of constant change, a planetary construction site where the very ground was being forged in fire and chaos. Slowly, over millions and millions of years, the Earth began to cool down. As the surface hardened, a thick atmosphere of gas and steam started to form around it. This steam came from the volcanoes that continued to rumble and spit out hot gas from deep within the planet. This blanket of clouds was incredibly thick, blocking out the sun's light. Then something wonderful happened. The planet cooled enough for the steam in the atmosphere to turn into water. It began to rain. This was no ordinary shower. It was a downpour that lasted for thousands of years, a global flood of epic proportions. This relentless rain filled the vast empty basins and craters across the planet's rocky surface. This is how the first oceans were born. They were not the blue, life-filled seas we know today. These early oceans were warm and likely a brownish-green color, full of dissolved minerals and iron from the rocks. The world was now a place of two great domains, solid, dark rock and vast, churning water. The air was still not breathable for animals like us. It lacked oxygen and was filled with gases that would be poisonous to us. The stage was set, but the actors had not yet arrived. The land was barren and empty. There were no green fields, no forests, and no sandy beaches. There was only rock, shaped by volcanic eruptions and the constant pounding of waves from the new oceans. The sun's light struggled to get through the thick clouds, so the world was often quite dim. The continents as we know them had not yet formed. Instead, there were large rocky land masses that would drift and crash into each other for millions of years to come. This was the early Earth, a stark and dramatic world of rock and water waiting patiently for the first spark of life. For an incredibly long time, the oceans remained empty. But deep beneath the waves, in the warm, mineral-rich water, a remarkable transformation was quietly beginning. The building blocks of life, complex molecules, started to come together. We do not know exactly how it happened, but eventually the first very simple living things appeared. These were not animals or plants, but tiny, single-celled organisms, far too small for any eye to see. These microbes were the pioneers of life on Earth. They were incredibly simple, yet they held the potential for everything that was to come. They were the ancestors of every plant and animal that has ever lived. Among these first life forms were special bacteria called cyanobacteria. They performed a kind of magic. They learned to use the faint sunlight that reached them through the water to make their own food. This process, which we call photosynthesis, had a very important side effect. It released a gas as waste. That gas was oxygen. For millions of years, these tiny organisms pumped oxygen into the oceans and then into the atmosphere. This slowly and fundamentally changed the entire planet. The air began to change from a poisonous mixture into something that could, one day, support larger, more complex life. As the oceans filled with oxygen, new possibilities arose. Life began to experiment. The simple, single cells started to cooperate, joining together to form larger, more complex organisms. The first plants, simple seaweeds and algae, appeared. They clung to rocks in the sunlit shallows, adding even more oxygen to the water. Then, the first simple animals emerged. Creatures like sponges and jellyfish drifted through the currents. They were soft-bodied and had no bones, but they were a significant step. Life was no longer just microscopic. It was now visible, moving and exploring its watery world. This explosion of new life happened entirely in the sea. The land remained completely empty and silent, while the oceans were becoming a busy, vibrant place filled with strange new creatures. The continents were still just barren rock. There was no soil, there were no trees, and no insects buzzed through the air. The great story of life was, for now, a purely aquatic one. The sea was the cradle of life, protecting and nurturing it, allowing it to grow in complexity and diversity over countless generations, preparing for the next great leap. After hundreds of millions of years in the water, life was ready for a new challenge. The land. The first pioneers were small, hardy plants, similar to mosses, that began to colonize the damp edges of the continents. They created the very first soil, breaking down the rock and creating a place for other plants to grow. Soon after, small animals followed them out of the water. Creatures like ancient insects and millipede-like arthropods were among the first to breathe air and walk on dry land. The world was finally turning green, and a quiet buzzing sound could be heard for the first time. The great colonization of the continents had begun. The age of fish gave way to the age of amphibians, creatures that could live both in water and on land. But the real masters of the land were yet to come. From these early land dwellers, a new group of animals evolved, the reptiles. They had tough, scaly skin and laid eggs with hard shells, which meant they were no longer tied to the water. They could explore deep into the new forests of giant ferns and conifers that now covered the land. This freedom allowed them to grow to enormous sizes and dominate the planet in a way no animal had before. This was the beginning of the age of dinosaurs. The world of the dinosaurs was a warm, tropical paradise. Huge, long-necked sauropods, the largest animals ever to walk the earth, stripped leaves from the tops of trees. Fierce carnivores like the famous Tyrannosaurus rex hunted other dinosaurs, their powerful footsteps shaking the ground. There were dinosaurs that flew in the sky, the pterosaurs, and powerful reptiles that swam in the oceans. For more than 150 million years, these magnificent creatures were the undisputed rulers of the planet. They came in all shapes and sizes, and they inhabited every corner of the globe, a testament to their incredible success. During this time, other much smaller animals lived in the shadows of the giants. Among them were the first mammals. They were tiny, shrew-like creatures, often active only at night, scurrying through the undergrowth to avoid being eaten. They were warm-blooded and covered in fur, but their time had not yet come. For now, the world belonged to the great reptiles. The planet was teeming with life, from the smallest insects to the most colossal dinosaurs. It was a dynamic and often dangerous world, but it was stable, ruled by these incredible giants for an unimaginably long time. The long reign of the dinosaurs came to a sudden and catastrophic end. About 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid several miles wide struck the Earth. The impact was more powerful than all the world's nuclear weapons combined. It created a gigantic crater and sent a cloud of dust and debris high into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun's light for months, perhaps even years. The world was plunged into darkness and cold. Plants could no longer grow, and the entire food chain collapsed. It was a global catastrophe unlike any other, triggering a mass extinction event that changed the course of life forever. The dinosaurs, with their great size and need for large amounts of food, could not survive in this new, harsh world. They vanished completely, along with many other types of animals and plants. But the end for them was a new beginning for others. The small, furry mammals that had lived in their shadows for so long survived the disaster. Their small size meant they needed less food, and their fur helped them to stay warm. With the great reptiles gone, a world of opportunity opened up for them. They were no longer hiding in the darkness. The world was now theirs to inherit. In the millions of years that followed the extinction, mammals began to flourish. They diversified into an amazing variety of forms, filling the empty roles left behind by the dinosaurs. Some grew larger, becoming the first giant mammals, like ancestors of rhinos and elephants. Others took to the trees, evolving into the first primates. Some even returned to the sea, becoming the ancestors of whales and dolphins. The world's continents continued to drift towards their present-day positions, and new kinds of plants, such as grasses and flowering plants, spread across the landscapes, creating new habitats like savannas and meadows. The Earth was once again full of life, but it was a very different kind of life. The age of giant reptiles was over, and the age of mammals had truly begun. The planet was now rich with forests, grasslands, and complex ecosystems teeming with a wonderful array of creatures. Everything was in place. The air was breathable, the climate was varied, and food was abundant. The world was ready for a new kind of animal, one with a large brain and clever hands. The stage was perfectly set, but the most transformative creature of all, the human, had not yet made its entrance.